Welcome, Barton. Welcome to Tech at the Table.
Well, thank you, Roy. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm glad you're here. I'm down in San Antonio, Texas, and you're up the road in Austin. How's the weather up there? Nice,
It's
nice
starting to
summer day.
it's starting to get hot. It's 86 right now, and it seems like it's hotter, but I mean this is nothing compared to what's going to happen in a couple months.
I
So
know
yeah,
we're gonna pay for our sins. Okay, Barton, why don't we introduce you?
sure.
We are here. I am Roy Ritthaler. I'm the host of Tech at the Table. I'm here with none other than Barton George, the founder of 808 Labs. Barton,
Yes, legend in my own mind. Yep.
legend in your own mind, but legend in the industry. Been here for a while. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about what 808 does.
Well, born in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is why it's called 808. That's the area code for Hawaii. It's
That's
all
a
my socials is Barton 808. So people think it might be the Rolling Drums. It's not that. But what 808 Labs is, we're providing insight and information on early stage startups, projects, and technologies. And so this is something that I've been doing for over 15 years, interviews with people
mhm.
in technology. A good example would be at DevOps Days back in 2012. I talked to this guy, CTO of this little company called Datadog. They'd just come out of private beta and they turned out to be a big deal. So just from being around, getting insight into what's happening, and I'm continuing to do that now, particularly in the AI space since it's everywhere.
And just so you know, and so everybody in the audience knows, you and I worked together at one point when you were not
Yes, you were
the third.
my manager, and I
I was
appreciate
for a
that.
little while. I had the pleasure, I guess pleasure is the right word, to be that for a little while. And you were on top of Project Sputnik, which was completely counterculture at the time to the Wintel world. Talk about that a little bit and how, where have you come from then? Because that was a cool project, right? That was dev focused,
Yeah,
open source. You talk about it. It was great.
yeah. The whole idea was that Dell was not very well known in the developer circles. We didn't have any credibility, so we're trying to figure out ways to do that. And a suggestion somebody had was, hey, why don't you take Ubuntu, put it on one of your laptops, make sure it works, and sell that, and developers will love it. And I thought, yeah, that's not going to happen because the amount of volume that people do at Dell, this is never going to go through the normal processes. So there was an internal innovation fund. I went and pitched to that, and I got a promise of $100,000 in 6 months to see if this would be a real thing. And one of the key points of this is doing it all out in the open via social media. And so
Mhm.
we were very open because you're always taking customer input with Dell or any other company, but this was actually doing it in the open, so people could vote things up or down. And we got enough positive feedback that we turned it into a real product. So it's gone over 12 years. It went from a one config, one system
I
to
remember that.
a whole line of workstations, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that wasn't even our goal. The main goal was changing the way people saw Dell, and that did work. So it wasn't that necessarily people went to Dell number one as the developer space. Yet, if you're an IT and you're looking to buy Dell gear and you wanted to get your developer's opinion, what do you think of Dell? They'd say, yeah, they're pretty good, or they understand us. And with the influence and power of the developers, that was important.
It was, and developers have always had outsized importance. And just speaking of outsized, by the way, it had the world's best T-shirt. By the way, your logo was amazing back then. So
Well,
just
thank
for
you.
everybody, you all look it up. So
Well, there's a new logo now with 808 Labs, but we'll save that for another time.
we'll save that for another. Well, you could show it. The thing about you've always been developer first. You've always been developer focused. You beat down a large enterprise and won, right? You were absolutely triumphant in that. So you've seen every arc of technology over the last couple of decades, at least, right?
Well, I
So
started out in Unix workstations,
okay,
dare I say, wow, almost 40 years ago. I didn't say that. Yeah, no, it's for quite a while. So,
look it. You don't look it, my
so
friend.
I have seen a lot.
You're doing something right. Okay, so we first thought about when we thought about what to talk about here. We thought about let's tee it off with Flexera State of the Cloud, which is the annual survey that we do. That's always got interesting insights. Kind of one of those milestone publications that everybody looks at. So, from that point of view, you moved from developer first to DevOps. You've been in the open source world and in the cloud world and now in the AI world. So there's a pretty strong arc. You've been through all the different development, kind of core development ways to develop types of applications to develop. So when you looked at the report, your first glance, cloud. versus AI. There's a lot of that in the report. What were your first kind of observations on it?
I think it was solid in a lot of places. There were also places that I saw that were I felt were presented as insights that I was thinking, well, doesn't everybody know this? I just one example would be hybrid cloud. It seemed to be that was something that we're talking about as being a big deal, and I just thought that was taken for granted at this point
Yeah.
as one example. I think there was also in certain places seemed to be some contradictions. One of the things was talking about using cloud to take costs out of your environment, and then another one, and that was in that graph. That's what it talked about, and then another one said cloud is all about innovation, and I believe both can be true, but it seemed to contradict each other in certain places. So
From highlights, like from a thing that you got out of it, in terms of things that have changed, for example, things that are some, headline worthy. What are two or three things that you think are worth talking about here?
I think one would be what is the AI adoption like, and what does it take to adopt AI? Because I think there's a lot of in the industry and what you read, what you hear, it's a lot of this. Well, it's a bit guardrail to guardrail. You either hear people say that it's not going to work, it's not helpful, and then people who say this is going to be it. And I think there was one thing they talked about using it in production, and I don't believe that. I think there are significant barriers to entry completely into the uh, enterprise. Doesn't mean that I think everybody should be using AI, but I think it's much more of a trying to figure out. There are no experts now. They're just people who have been playing with it a while, and things are changing so quickly that you have to be on top of it, but you can't back one horse at this point or one technology.
So you're kind of taking that from the enterprise point of view, not so much the bleeding edge. Like there are plenty of experts in the industry, we know that. But are you
But
looking at
yes,
from and State of the Cloud is very much kind of enterprise survey. It does small business, it does large, but they're all sort of business oriented developers, business oriented operators. So you're thinking
I,
about from the
well, I'm
enterprise.
thinking there are experts, but they're people in machine learning or people who understand it from the mechanics in the
Yeah.
back and how this works. But what you don't have is people knowing how to actually apply it. People are learning and they're
Yeah.
trying different ways. And I think back to the bleeding edge, it's a lot easier if you are a small development team or a greenfield company. You don't have all these processes to integrate with. You have a small number of people. You can talk amongst yourselves, but when it gets to enterprise, as you know, and I'm sure most of the people watching this knows, you have to integrate into processes. You need to get it into on the approved list. You need to be able to
Right.
explain training to people. And I could go on and on. I think there's
Yeah.
at this
Great.
point, yeah,
Let's hold that just for a sec. Like
yeah.
one last thing about the State of the Cloud report I thought that was interesting was I saw, and maybe these are rose-colored glasses, maybe because I interviewed Steve Evans a while back on this, that the whole shift in cloud is to value as opposed to cost, let's say. The idea of consulting with your development partners to make sure that they're getting the right feedback from you on cloud. They don't want to be, I love using big words, profligate in their use of cloud.
Oh, let me
Like
get my dictionary. Hold on a second.
that's the word of power right there. But you know what I mean? They don't want to overspend, but on the other hand, they don't want to let cloud spend get in the way of true innovation, right? That I saw in the report as well. And I thought that was super healthy. It got to this place where it wasn't just a sandbox play thing. It's actually a mature
Oh
platform.
yeah, 2006 is when it came out, right, with AWS, and so that's 20
We're a
years,
long
right?
way. Yeah, we're a long,
Yeah,
we're
and
year
and
anniversary.
uh,
Yeah.
and so I think it definitely is. It's so much more mature than say AI that you have processes, you've got measurements, and I think I was surprised to hear that costs on cloud are actually rising, which seems to be counterintuitive as the industry goes on. You'd think that unless it's AI, which they did bring that out, but
They-
you would think as an industry matures, you learn to dial in the costs. You need to better
Right.
watch what you're spending.
You do, and I think like if watch that other podcast. It's pretty good because it talks about if you think about the application classes, the ones that are more mature, and they're dialing it in, right? That's a cost savings environment. The ones that are bleeding edge, a lot of AI apps right now are not constrained. They're just informed. Here's the cost that here's the money you're spending. Okay. As you're spending tokens, as you're spending
Exactly. This is how much you're
subscription,
spending on tokens.
here's what you're spending, but don't let it hold you back. There's the funny, it's not even funny. So many developers are now motivated to spend more, not less, in order to move the innovation forward, right? To leverage AI as much as possible.
And I think it's a learning curve too. I don't think they necessarily know. I mean, just using AI myself, not for coding, it's very capricious in the way that another big word, in the way that it
True.
helps you. I think it's oftentimes it's two steps forward, one step back. You'll be
Right.
going along and be so impressed, and all of a sudden it will throw something at you that is just maddening. So I
Yeah.
think in this token maxing, I think there is value in people going and playing with it because that's at this point that's the only way you're going to learn. I think one thing else in the report they talked about MSPs getting into consulting for AI,
Mhm.
and what you call OpenAI just announced that, as well as Anthropic. I don't think people are there yet that they have the expertise to help
Yeah.
people integrate this. They may just how to use it, but that at that point in the future, that's going to be extremely important because I don't think people have defined use cases. I think training isn't there, and so I think it will become, but it's still at a very transactional point.
Early.
It's yeah,
I'll use the word nascent, a nascent phase.
yes,
Really good,
yes.
right? So it does remind me. In fact, last week I was at the ServiceNow Knowledge Conference. It was fascinating because ServiceNow is making a play, and a strong one, to use their platform as kind of an enterprise governance, execution environment, security environment, and being very friendly to different coding environments that bring that in. I give them
That
credit for
is huge. Security and governance. Just yeah.
bold strategy, right? Okay, so let's talk about it. So you spend time with enterprises as well as with bleeding edge developers. We're having that classic developers do the design, bring in the new application class, bring in the new tech, and here it comes into the enterprise. What
It
are you
works on my
seeing?
laptop. The rest is your. I don't. You do security.
Right.
You go to production. It worked on my laptop.
I know, and there's so many. One of the things Flexera will do is they'll detect a lot of that, and there's all kinds of sprawl of models. There's all kinds of stuff entering into the enterprise. So you either have very strict enterprises, from what I see, that are locked down and maybe not as innovative, and then you have those that are a lot more open and a lot more innovative, but need governance really bad. What do you see? Like that's what I see, but what do you see? You're the expert here.
Well, I think and this gets kind of like Sputnik, right? We had to sort of find where we could cut corners and when we had to adhere, right? When do we plug into the machine, which gives us the leverage of from being a small project, and when, if we do use the project process, it will slow us down. Just one point, an example there would be when I met with my executive sponsor, Namdi, who you knew as well.
You're good. Yeah.
I would just take an 8x10 piece of paper and I'd just write out my notes and we'd sit next to each other and go through it. Whereas typically what you'd do is you'd spend 2 weeks working on PowerPoints, getting all your numbers, taking time you'd be using to work on the project. Uh, and that's a good point where you do want to stay nimble. But as I said, we did want to plug into the website because that's how it
Okay.
helps us. So anyway, I think that's part of I think the security and governance are huge for AI. So John Willis, one of
Yeah.
the co-authors of the DevOps Handbook, he gave a
Yeah.
great talk, and then I interviewed him afterwards at Scale in Pasadena, the Southern California Linux Expo. And what he was talking about is rogue agents and the fact that these are this is a whole order of magnitude different than say cloud was, and that you've got people developers using them, you've got agents out there, and then agents spawn sub agents, and the
Right.
velocity and the magnitude and the lack of oversight is kind of spooky. It just sort of goes throughout your network, and it's one thing he brought up is that we are now going from deterministic to probabilistic, right? There aren't specific exact examples. You're now going to something where it's checking the possibility to come to those answers. So his whole thing was, and he's very positive about AI. He wasn't saying, stay away from it, keep going, but this is something you need a whole new security model because it just doesn't fit.
It's you do. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But comparing it back to cloud, when cloud was proliferating, right? When we had development going on, we had, the classic credit card. Amazon was entering the enterprise
Hmm.
to developers. that was one thing around resources and automation, for example, but there seems to be a whole other thing around intelligent allocation of resources, intelligent automation, the
Hmm.
ability to spot, to have velocity like we do, independent action. That seems like a whole multiple directions, multiple orders of magnitude higher degree of governance that to really make it work inside an enterprise. Is that
Hmm.
why, when you saw on the State of the Cloud report, hey, we're using it in production. Is that why you had a little bit of a skepticism around that? Is that
It
why?
wasn't the cloud, it was the AI piece of
It's
it.
the age.
Because
Yeah,
cloud is embraced, right? As you mentioned, you originally had shadow AI with shadow cloud,
yeah,
and that was one of the things that actually enabled developers to get more power because they were able to, they didn't have to wait for IT to requisition hardware. They could
right.
just go and spin it up, as you mentioned, on their credit card. But the part that I think is different is AI. Cloud is a pretty much well-known commodity. There's still a lot, like we're saying, with if costs are going up, you need to take costs out. You need to integrate them better with your current processes. But it's sort of a well-worn path compared to at least AI, where really nobody knows anything.
Yeah,
That's my
no, it's a new
thesis.
world. It's a new world out there. So, how do you take, you talk to plenty of CTOs, you talk to plenty of leaders, R&D leads and VPs and executives and developers. How do you do this in the right way? Like you're in this world right now. You don't want to put your company at too much risk, right? We always say governance. What are some things you recommend?
I mean, I think there's it's the softer skills that we need to, or the softer side of this that we need to attack first,
Okay, well,
because
yeah,
just like with DevOps, it's more of a methodology. You can have all the tools you want, but if culturally you don't shape your company or make it acceptable to take DevOps, it's gonna wither on the vine. So with AI, for example, I was at a conference, that same scale conference, and someone from Amazon, a manager there, said, we're being told to use AI. The question is how. So it's everybody AI, go do that thing. We have licenses to this, but you need to be able to give direction. You need to be able to say, this is what we're in the experimentation phase, or we're in the production phase, which I don't believe anyone is. But you need to set guidance. And I think another big problem with AI is its image, right? I think there's some there's a lot of people who like it, but I don't think AI they could do with a better PR agency AI, because you get people like
for
Dario
sure.
Amodei saying that everyone's going to be, if you're a knowledge worker, you're going to be out of work. So that's not comforting in a large agency when you're told that AI is coming and it's going to go throughout it's like having a layoff. Okay, we're going to lay off 10,000
Yeah,
people. Everybody freaks out. Everybody freezes. So
yeah.
you tell them that this AI is coming, and they're thinking, "Well, is my job going next?"
That
So I think there has to be more dialogue. There has to be more transparency, and as the leadership comes up, and it's great to say we're all going to be using AI, but can you double click in that and set some goals and some expectations?
There's some norms, some standards, some
Hmm.
organizational culture around it. One of the big issues around any kind of automation, but in particular, intelligent automation and autonomous automation, right? Totally autonomous decision making kind of thing, is trust. It's more than trust. Trust. It's ethics. I mean, That's part of the softer side. I think it gets diminished more than it should in many. People
Hmm.
don't talk about it enough. Are you
Hmm.
talking about it, or are people around you talking about it? And what are they saying?
That's not what I'm hearing so much. Is that
Yeah,
at big companies, talked to a friend who works at a Fortune 50 company, and he's talking about the developers using it and how amazing it is, and that's great. But then how do you scale it, right? And there
true.
is talk from the CEO about this is don't think that we're not vulnerable to some small company who's using AI to leverage it. So setting the tone, but then the next step is, okay, we should be playing with it. They are playing with it. Then how do we take it from there? And what are the expectations? And the clearer you can be about that, and not just that part, but you need to reorganize how your organization is laid out, because you're going to be, and I don't know if it's an urban myth, but they talk about when the railway was laid and
Yeah.
people put carriages on there with horses, right? So it's using the old technology with the new one, but you're not making use of it. And so same thing with this.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you don't change the way your organization is, how responsibilities of people, because those are changing.
They're big.
So
Yeah, it reminds me, like the first phase of any tech shift like this, a lot of times enterprise managers will lift and shift. They'll take the old workload or the old approach and put it on
mhm,
the new. But we're
right.
talking about something fundamentally different here. So let's take an example. Like your center is the world of DevOps, I think. I'll give you credit. You're kind of one of the core people in that DevOps community, and you can see agents taking over set of those roles. You can see a lot of that being automated. What's actually happening in the trenches around DevOps or the operations side right now, as far as AI goes? Is it cautious? Is it hell bent? We're
I
going.
think it's. I mean, you've got somebody like I said, John Willis, who's sounding the alarm, and as I said, he's doing it in a way that says, be afraid, don't use it. It's, hey, we as a industry, we need to come together and start thinking through this. There's a small company that just came out of the Y Combinator program, Mendril, and what they've seen is a problem in the past where you've got the software life cycle and getting it through the pipeline has always been tough. It's been slow.
Yeah, yeah,
Now that developers can write code 10 times faster, what was kind of a pain is now huge. And so what they've created is agentic DevOps people, right? So and
yeah.
it's not going to, at this point, it's not replacing DevOps people. They need to learn how to use and how to work with it. People are going up a level as far as you're orchestrating code or you're orchestrating deployments as opposed to actually
Coding.
getting in there with hands-on, right? And that's
Yeah,
people who are further along, right? There's, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed, and so that I
that's
think
true.
that's particularly that's William Gibson. I'm paraphrasing that, but
I
yeah.
do love that though. But I do love that though. Exactly. Like, okay, so product managers, here's another area, right? So product managers today or yesterday, requirements, PR FAQs, documents, narratives, driving execution, making sure that we got the right thing and so on, for validation. In the new world, they're coding through, you know, AI methods. They can prototype.
We're all going to
They,
become product managers.
do you
That's
think
what,
so?
once again, this company Mendril is saying that's really where it's all going, right? Because product managers, as you're saying, they're going to be able to code. There's going to be more abstraction, so you're not even going to need to know as much as you do now. But you need to have a 360 view. You need to have a bunch of different capabilities, and it's
Hmm.
how do you work with other people. So I think there's a certain truth to that, and how things are going to change.
So we're all going to be product managers. And having some product management background, like I'm all about that. I think, and
Yes.
seriously though, yeah, I mean, that role that sees the outside and translated into product is very empowered, like heavily empowered by AI. And it will, what do you think from a pure dev point of view? So the last question in this one, from a pure developer point of view, again, they're writing code with help.
Mhm.
How does that look in 5 years in terms of the developer career path? What are developers doing in 5 years?
But I think it's back to that they become more of an orchestrator, coordinating,
I think it's
uh,
the same kind of
as opposed
balance.
to actually hands on. So it's a higher level of abstraction. But at this point, it's still not so. You need to be able to review your code. Now, code is a lot easier than say writing a story would be, and so and it's objective. It runs or it doesn't. But then, do you know how to debug it if something happens? So
Right,
I think
right.
there is a big change, and I think, say, with open source, just one example was there's a project, and now with people generating pull requests through AI, this little team is getting bombarded by all these AI generated pull requests. And it's not at the stage where you can just take them all. You need to review them. And then the other thing is if you kick something back, then the person needs to know how to look at it and see what's wrong. Whereas if they just said, well, I did it with AI. The friend's daughter is a TA, and she has a lot of her students are developing, and they'll submit something to her, and she'll say, this you don't pass because of this, and they said, but I use AI. right? So that's not an excuse. You're ultimately responsible for what you
What you
put together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there so last question down this vein because you introduced it in the OS in the open source communities in the large, how are they attacking or approaching or throttling or dealing with AI like this? Because there is a huge governance around open source that wasn't developed in the age of AI, but is now being potentially overwhelmed by it.
Well, ask me next week. I'll know a lot more. I'm going to the Open
But
Source Summit
okay,
starting Monday. But I think
okay,
back to that one conference, the Scale, which is a developer conference, which is open source, there
yeah,
was an open talk. The same woman from Amazon who was leading the talk and said, we're supposed to use it, but how? It was we were as an audience, we were all talking about it. She started with the question: Is open source good or bad? Sorry, is AI good or bad for open source? And it was probably 2/3 said it was okay, was good for it. But then we had a discussion, and people were once again. I was impressed by the pragmatic way people approach this. So people weren't saying AI is a panacea. We all have to be doing it, and people weren't saying it's evil. The world is ending as we know it. So I think using that as an example, I think people are trying to figure it out, and I think particularly uh, the open source like Linux Foundation is really trying to figure out how do we do this. I know just for licensing point of view, it's been very tricky. Um,
mhm, mhm.
there's the OCI, I can't remember, not OCI, the OSI, Open Source Initiative. They have their definition of this is what open source AI is, which is a sort of binary. If you meet these qualifications, you are. Linux Foundation, unless it's changed, has taken an approach. It's gradients, right? You are open
Yes,
source 2,
agreed
you're
with
open
those.
source 3, which is
Yeah,
very different.
yeah.
But once again, different technologies call for different measures. So I'm very interested in seeing next week. Jim Zemlin's going to give the keynote, the executive director, and hear what he's saying. And it's an open source crowd and how it affects what's going on. And it's in fact this Mythos
Hmm.
model that came out from Anthropic, which didn't came out because it wasn't safe for our world and was going to. How true that is or not, Linux Foundation was given access to this alongside the top players, which was really good to see.
That's
I
good
mean, I
to
haven't heard Linux Foundation mentioned in mainstream media like that alongside these others. So it's good to know that they're actually in there with their voice. And like I said, I'll be very interested to hear more on where they net out at this point.
I really love what we've been talking about. I mean, we're gonna end it here in a moment, but the
No,
idea of,
can't. This is too
I don't know,
fun.
this
I
could
got
go
more
on
to say.
forever. But the idea of humans and human interaction with this tech, human governance around the tech, human intelligence, we're in that phase now where all of that's forming. And very exciting times indeed, right? But it's the humans that are going to actually set the tone for how we move forward on this, right? They have to, because otherwise,
Yeah,
I think there's significant risk, right? Okay, so if you're last word,
yeah.
you're leaving the audience.
Panacea. Oh wait, another one,
I don't
bigger
want to. You
word.
can go panacea if you want, but you're leaving the audience with something to think about, to ponder, to move forward with. What are you going to leave our audience with around these topics?
I mean, I guess what I would say is you should be playing with this, but realizing that it's now is the time to be experimenting it. And if you're putting it into, I don't think anyone's, well, there are people putting it in production, but beware when you do that. And if you don't play with it, if you don't start using it, you're going to be left behind. But also know that it's very early in the game, and so proceed with caution. POC level, small groups, that type of thing. But you get this very much back and forth about it's safe, it's not safe, and so that would be my thought. Get in there, start doing it, and set direction from the senior leadership. Say these are what our expectations are. Be clear. We don't quite know everything. We're thinking this, we're thinking that. But
Right.
without that, there's this anxiety and fear that I don't get AI and it's going to take my job because I don't. And then it just, people are paralyzed. So,
Beautiful. Barton, thanks. Good luck, 808 Labs. You're doing a great
thank you.
job
Thank
out
you very
there.
much.
Good luck with the conference next week. We'll come back. We'll talk about what's happened in the next after a few months. This stuff's changing so
I
quickly.
would
We'll
appreciate it. Yeah, no, things
come back.
do.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, Barton. Have a good one.
All
Take
right.
care.
Pleasure as always. Thank you, Roy.